Welcome to TNT, baby, the naked truth with Taylor Armstrong, where I'm going to expose everything about my life, and my guests are going to come on, get naked with me, and bear it all. Now let's get naked. It's TNT. I'm Taylor, and of course, I'm here with the lovely Gemma. Hi, honey. How are you?
How
Okay,
are you?
I'm great, but I'm a little freaked out. So one of my friends met this guy, and they've only been dating for a few months, and all of a sudden they're getting married.
What?
Okay, I think it's cute and all, but I'm thinking, how well do you actually know this guy? Have you had any serious conversations, or is this just like a lust fest that's happening?
I don't know. It might be the only chance they have to get married, so they're just going for it.
They're just going to go for it.
Yeah.
But then when reality sets in,
Oh no, that's going to be an adventure.
an adventure.
Yeah.
And so I was thinking about things that people, now that you and I have both been married forever,
Yeah.
things that
Or
we
so it
should
seems.
have asked that we didn't prior
Oh
to
my God.
getting married. I think there's so many things. You don't
There
want to find
are.
this stuff out later after you're already committed, because then it's too late.
Yeah, that's bad.
It's bad,
It's
right?
really bad. I mean, the stories, we all know somebody who's just had a horrific go of it.
100%.
Yeah.
So I think the number one thing that's hard to talk about when you're in love is finances, because you don't want to
Right.
put a big damper on the love fest.
And that's so difficult though, because it's like I don't want to use the word taboo, but
I know.
it's taboo. You're like not supposed to say how much do you make?
I know.
Or what is your debt? Or
Right.
like you're not allowed to ask anything because it means you don't have true love.
Right, exactly. Like, and then it's, oh, are you just using me for my money? If
Right.
you're going to
and
ask
then if
me
you have
questions
money,
about my
of
money,
course. It's
right?
never even.
And if you don't have it, that's an embarrassment. And then are you feeling like I'm not worthy because I can't keep up? Or the whole
All of
thing,
it.
I think it's a very hard discussion to have. So,
Well, it's like ego gets in the way too.
right. And also spending habits is a big difference
Oh.
too. Like, what I think a good question would be, what is reasonable for you for like what you would expect for a car? How much
Right.
would you spend for a big ticket item?
Like
a house,
100,000 on a car.
like 100,000 on a car, and somebody else
Okay.
might think that's absolutely ridiculous.
Right. I know. I think I have that problem with my husband.
I think you do too.
I know. I'm like, I need this car. He's like, that's just ridiculous. I'm like, that's average. Like nothing is cheap anymore. I mean, even a Toyota 4Runner, it's like if you get it the way you want it, it's still $80,000.
I know, but
So-
I mean that's a big question, because
Yeah.
if all of a sudden you come home and you're like, by the way, Tony, I just bought a Porsche, and he's like, wait, we never discussed this ahead of time.
Yeah.
What you expect from big ticket items,
Yeah. What do you expect?
and also a house. I mean, if you're
Yeah.
marrying a bachelor who's used to living a bachelor style life, and
I have
then
a girlfriend that got married, and then she was like, are we going to buy a house? And he's like, I don't want to buy a house. He actually never wants to be a homeowner. He thinks the whole thing's a racket,
right,
that you should never own a home. And now they're renting, and she's like, oh my God, I'm going to be old and have no place to live and like, or anything. And my husband doesn't believe in buying.
right. And one of my friends is like a billionaire next
Yeah.
door kind of guy who is just, I like living in a bachelor style like condo.
Loves it, yeah.
Loves it. And he's never moving into a house. He's in
Yeah.
that same boat. So that, I think that's a huge question to ask.
I do.
Where do you want to live? What style of life do you
Well,
want to have?
And besides asking the question, I think you also need to not be so love blind that you just pay attention to people's actions. Because the truth is, even without people answering straightforward, I think all the answers are there. We just don't see it because we're like too busy getting busy. And that's it.
But that's what I'm worried about, is I think that she's just like, the sex is so great. I'm like, that fades, honey. I
Right.
promise. Like when real problems set in, it's
In
gonna
10 years, you're
change.
not going to be all about like, the kitchen counter.
I know, 100%. And they say that when I hope this isn't true, but they say the first year you're married, if you put a marble in a jar,
Yeah.
then if every time you have sex after that first year, you'll never empty the jar. Do you think that's true? Oh my gosh, don't implicate yourself, but I'm just saying, I think you have
The
like
jar is never empty.
the jar, like
So you're
for the
saying that you
rest
have
of your
sex
marriage.
more times in the first year than you do the rest of your life.
Right. And you're also like way more kinky and cool and
that
having
part, for
fun.
sure.
And like you mentioned the counter. So like at first you're like, bang me on the counter, baby. And then you've been married for like 3 years and you're like, I just cleaned this counter.
Right.
We're not getting on the counter.
But
no.
then is this also okay? So yeah, you're like, don't
there's
do not
Clorox on that
touch
counter.
my counter.
Right? Get off the counter.
I don't know if you have dark granite, but dark granite is the worst.
Oh my
Like-
visuals. Thank you so much,
You're
Gemma.
like, there's like ass imprint on the granite. In the
Great.
morning.
I love it.
That's how you know your husband's cheating.
Exactly. Right. Because you're like, that is not me. Because
That
that
is
was only that
not
was
my ass print on the
first year
counter.
sex. That was it. That was first year. Like walking around the house naked. Now I'm like
Oh my
completely
God.
covered all the
Well,
time.
for me, it's because of the ass size. Because I've been married for so long, it's just gradually gotten bigger as I go
Stop
along.
it. You're so
But
funny.
no, I do think it's crazy. And also, what does that say about your marriage? I hate to say that because I do know that I have, well, two couple of friends, only two, but they're like just as hot for each other 20 years later as they were in the
Aw,
beginning. Like it's
that's-
crazy.
That's really sweet.
Like every
though.
time we go to dinner, they're like rubbing each other's legs. They're like making out in the corner, and you're like, you guys are so sick.
Is it like sick, weird, awkward? Like he's gonna boner. He's
Yeah.
definitely gonna
Oh
boner
no, we
at
all
the
know
dinner
now
table.
because we've been friends for so long. But like, yeah,
It's
they're-
that scene from Vacation.
yeah.
Dad, I think he's gonna pork her.
But they have fun. They make it a point to have fun. So I think it's a lot. I think they're also very well off.
Right.
Yeah.
So then, right, the financial
helps.
thing, right?
So I think finances being like the major reason for why people have relationship issues is like 95% of probably all reasons.
Absolutely.
So
So
because if you have money, you can work through a lot of things.
or you can get like really good therapists to
Yeah,
work through it
You
for
can
you.
get a good therapist to do it for you.
So but the money thing always comes up eventually.
Yeah.
Like having Kennedy be a stepchild
Right.
to John, he wasn't used to the way that I spoil her.
Right.
And I know I overdo it, but at the same time he was like, you've got to be kidding me. Like she
Right.
doesn't know how to not spend money because
Right.
of the way I raised her. And
Right.
it's something I know now I need to get under control since she's going to college. And I've really set myself up. But it was an issue.
I know, but we learned that later. Like even my daughter, and probably not even half the degree as Kennedy, right? But still, was very spoiled.
Yes.
Like I couldn't afford a lot of those things, but I could still afforded like Coachella tickets and Sephora tickets and taking her places. And there was never like we don't have money for anything. Of course, she didn't ask for big things. Like she never, well, until she got married, and then she got her husband to get her the BMW. But besides that,
Right, which goes back to the whole, what are you going to spend on a car?
Yeah, but
Because he
they're
was probably a
still
little
spoiled.
shocked.
It's really hard. I don't know how in society you don't spoil people. I mean, when you're a kid, if your child is getting a Starbucks drink, they're spoiled.
Right.
Literally.
All day, every day.
Yeah. Like, that's it.
I know. But
Yeah.
that is a big,
If they're over ordering Uber, you officially need
Yeah.
to take the credit cards away.
and I think that's a conversation that would be difficult to have because you're in love and you're getting married, like my
Right.
friend, to say, oh, and by the way, I spoil my kid, which is going to scare the other person off.
Oh.
Perhaps. So you don't want to say it out loud.
I mean, well, yeah, and then that's all child rearing questions. Like religion, right?
Right.
All of those things that are like super, super important that, you don't want to be there at a circumcision and being like, we're not doing this. Yes, we are.
Exactly.
It's a big deal.
Right. And of my friends, I've had a few that have converted
Yeah.
from one to the other.
For their
And
spouse.
that's like an amazing commitment. But at the same time, does it then come up later? Is there resentment from that?
Yeah.
Like, I did this for you, and now
Like,
what
I
are you
don't
going to
see
do
how
for
it could like
me?
never affect you later at some point. Because so many different things, I think, especially with religion, like so many different things come up for all of us, like in our lives where we actually, even if we don't think we're religious, in 20 years from now, you might be praying to God where when you were 20, you didn't believe in God. Like we all go out, like we grow as people.
Right.
So things that are so fundamentally like who you are as a person, I think is really a difficult call. So if you start out on different religions, even though you think like, oh, well, we're going to do this, we're going to celebrate both of them or whatever, fundamentally who you are, if you're raised in a religious household, is going to believe and gear towards a certain way of thinking, right?
And did you just say right, Gemma?
I did.
Okay,
Oh
I have
my
instituted
God.
a system around here because Gemma's favorite word is right, and that is her affirmation word, and I so appreciate it because
I just
I
want
love
you
the
to know
fact
that
that
I
you
know.
constantly tell me I'm right.
Okay, like.
Okay, like, and
You
that is
say-
I'm the like, and
you
you're
say
the right.
you're
But
the
those
like
are our
and right.
affirmation words, and we
It
have to
is.
stop. We have
do.
got to stop because
so
we
bad.
are more intelligent than right and like.
Oh yeah, the first time we watched one of these shows back and
Mhm.
I was listening to us, and I'm sure you had the same experience. I was like, oh my God, do I sound
was
like
like-
that? Why do I keep repeating that word?
And I don't know the answer, and we have to do
So
better. So
we
I think
do. Thank you
how
for
are we going
catching
to
me.
how are we going to replace like or like unless it's similar to or I agree instead of right?
I
So
agree.
I've instituted this new system where we have a bucket. It's the right and like bucket, and every time one of us says right or like, we have to put a coin, a poker
Oh
chip
my
into the
gosh.
bucket. And
Okay.
then you'll hear the noise and you'll know.
So I'm already down.
You're down.
You know I'm losing
Well, I
this
said
thing.
like already, so I put it in there. So put your right chip in because this is happening. We're going to
my
get rid of
gosh.
this habit for us.
Oh, so when I say right, I put the chip in.
Yes.
Okay,
And then
so here's
when
my...
I say like, I have to put my chip
Okay.
in. Okay.
There we go.
I agree.
Yes.
Okay, back to what we were talking about. My friend who's getting married, who I feel
Yeah.
like needs to ask all these difficult questions, it's going to come up later in your marriage. So you may as well get it on the table early on.
Yeah.
How much debt do you have? Very, very difficult question.
Right?
But you don't want to be blindsided. You go to buy a house. Oh, you just did it again. I love it. I'm going to make so much money on this game, guys. You're going to love it. I'm going to take all of you out later after I win.
Oh my gosh. Do I get to go or do I just like have to stay behind?
You have to stay in your little right prison. That's
Oh
it.
my
You have to stay.
gosh.
No, you can come too. But you have to pay since you put all the chips in. So that's a difficult conversation to have. How much debt do you have? And maybe there's an easier way to put it is, if we go to get a mortgage later, is this going to work?
That is a very big deal. I mean, it is a very big deal when all of a sudden you think, when you're in love, you're like, oh, we're going to buy a house. We're going to do this. We're going to do that. Where we want to live, like all these things. And then it comes down to buying the house. And they're like, I don't have enough money to buy that house.
Right.
Or I can't qualify for that house.
Exactly. My credit's terrible.
I don't have any retirement. I actually don't believe in saving for retirement.
Let's just wing it.
I mean, you're going to die. It's okay.
Right?
Yeah.
Oh, shoot. Now I said right. I don't even know what's going to happen here. We're both going to be broke. So asking that question, there's got to be a more gentle way to put it, thinking, in looking at our future, I want to make sure that we're both on the same page for our needs and our retirement. And how much debt do you have?
Okay. And when the other person, if they don't want to play ball and have the conversation, you should be committed to leaving at that point. Yeah. Because if somebody can't have the conversation with you, they're the wrong person.
Well, because the conversations get deeper and bigger,
harder
and harder as we move forward.
What if you get cancer? What if something happens and you can't communicate about big things? You have to communicate about the big things.
You really do.
Yeah.
And then separate bank accounts. Are we going to keep our bank account separate? Are we going to have a mutual bank account plus our separate? How does that look?
I think, well, I definitely think that both people should keep their own accounts and not just have a joint account, but you should probably have a household account or something, whatever that goes, like where you both agree to put so much money in if you're both working. But then that leads to other questions, like if you're younger and you're like, somebody's going to stay home with it. I said like. Okay.
We're going to learn from this.
Yeah, this is going to be...
Shot collars are next. I think that might be our next.
Oh, gosh. Scary.
We'll let the guys run the shot collars.
Right. Oh, no.
Every time they hear us.
Could you imagine?
Well, that does. It evolves into another question.
And I think that's why in some religions where they make you go through premarital counseling, even though it's pretty much making sure both people are committed to God, it's also making sure that they're committed to God and then themselves, right? And then their children. I'll just put another one in. And then after it's that premarital counseling is that conversation. So even if you don't go to premarital counseling, it's imperative to have a long-lasting relationship with anyone to talk those things out, I think. Even in business relationships.
I was going to say the same. I mean, you and I are business partners, and we have to, you just said right again. You and I are business partners, and we have to have difficult conversations all the time to make sure that we're on the same page and that we have each other's backs. And if something goes wrong, then what's the end result? And that leads to divorce. Like, how do you feel about divorce? And talking about that on the front end when you're madly in love and you're talking about weddings and everything, saying, how do you feel about divorce?
Right.
Interesting. Right. Oh my gosh.
Right.
It's never ending.
Here's my money.
I'm becoming a very wealthy woman here.
Oh my gosh.
So that I was doing a little research and recognizing that there are patterns if you have parents that have had super rocky divorces versus parents that have been together forever, and that role modeling, what that looks like when you're talking about what's going to happen if we ever get divorced.
And you know that a lot of people say it shouldn't matter. You're not your parents. All these different things where you're not supposed to look at somebody's relationship with their parents or their parents as what they might be predisposed to happening in your own or repeating those cycles. And as bad as it sounds, although that's true, you're not your parents. I mean, you actually are.
Right.
Genetically, you are your parents.
I agree.
And you're grown up, you grow up in a specific type of atmosphere that's obviously part of your subconscious mind, the choices that you make. I mean, I think there's been studies done even that show that people usually get divorced at the same age their parents got divorced. So if
Ooh.
I'm, if my parents got divorced when I was 7, right, then I might be more likely to get divorced when my children are 7.
That is very
And there was like a whole
interesting.
study I'd read about that. We have to look it up.
I definitely
'cause
want
it
to
was
look
a
that
while
up.
ago, but I have to find it.
There are studies as well. You and I both were in domestic violence relationships and marriages, and there are definitely statistics on that. If you were a child in a domestic violence home, either becoming a victim or an abuser, those statistics are very unfortunate, but pretty accurate.
And also being controlling, like different things that are very, like, I know that, like, with my kids from having like an abusive household when they were really young, they have the exact textbook issues, right, later in life. And so
Right.
you're like, I'm so sorry. Oh my gosh. Jeez, you guys.
This is like shooting
I'm
fish in a
losing.
barrel.
I'm gonna need more chips.
She's gonna have to call the house for some more chips for the money.
And I think having that communication is really important. Like, I even have communication very well with my kids. And I think that communicating with your kids is also just as important as communicating with your spouse. Like, I tell my I tell my kids, like, we talk openly, like, they know, like, I'm struggling with this, it could be related to this. And so I think there's at least that open communication helps deal with things that are hard,
I absolutely agree. And I think if you know for sure that your spouse's parents went through a really bad, long, dragged out divorce,
It could happen to you.
it definitely had to have an impact on them. It's not as though you just get to skate through something like that.
Yeah.
So what are the emotional ramifications that leave you afraid of divorce or so bound to the person that even though you need to get a divorce, you don't want to because your parents were together forever?
Leads to all other types of things for the kids.
Codependency. You
Right?
and I could go on forever.
Well, that's what this whole breaking cycles thing is. I mean, really, it's up to every single person to understand their generational trauma, right? So that they can, I'll put a chip in a minute. So that they can move forward in a better way, and so that we're not giving that generational trauma to our kids and our kids' kids and on, and then they all hit 40 and they're like, "What just happened to me?"
It's breaking the cycle.
You'd have to break the cycle.
Breaking the cycle. So when we come back, I definitely want to ask you about something about keeping on a budget.
Oh,
Because
God.
I know this is a Gemma problem. We'll
It
be
is
right
a
back.
problem.
It's TNT. It's TNT. We're back. I'm Taylor, and this is Gemma. And we are knee deep in a conversation because one of my friends is getting married. I feel like she has not known this person long enough to ask all the critical questions that after being married for so many years, these things are going to come up one
Absolutely.
way or another. So you may as well get them off the table so you know what you're in for a little bit more than just like lusty and lovey right now. It's all the
It's so
kisses
hard.
and roses phase before you realize roses also have thorns.
Right?
You just don't know where those thorns are. So try to find out from the front end, right? I'm making so much money on our new right or like bucket, which is anytime Gemma says the word right or like, or I say right or like, we have to put money in the bucket. And then
my gosh.
we're going to have to pick a winner and then go to Vegas and use our chips or something.
Actually, that'd be good.
That would be good.
Actually, we need a vacation so bad that like we might just put a bunch of chips in the bucket.
Call it the
then.
right or like tour.
It is like
Take
right?
all of our money. Like, right?
Right? Oh my gosh.
We need shirts. We gotta
Yeah,
make some
for sure.
shirts just to remind us not
I
to.
wonder how many people, if there's
do it.
any people out there, they should totally comment wherever they are watching this and tell us if they have a friend that says one word repeatedly over and over again.
When we listen to episodes of the show is when we both identified the words we say consistently.
Yeah.
Which drove me crazy because we're both
You
articulate.
drive yourself crazy.
And I used to get on to my daughter about saying like all the time. And I
And then you
realized
realize she was
I
you.
actually, yeah, she might have learned it from me. And
Yeah.
I'm like, I'm like petrified about it. I'm just petrified.
You're petrified. You're
I'm
not like
petrified.
petrified.
I'm not like petrified. I
Oh
just
my
am.
God.
Because I
Okay.
think now she's just becoming me, which is terrifying, by
There's
the way.
no way to stop it.
There's no way.
I
They've
know.
lived with us, and now she's leaving me.
Oh,
And I'm
I know.
sure when
It's
she
so
comes back,
hard.
she'll still say Like.
She will.
So we were talking about definitely finances is such a huge thing in relationships and marriage especially, and what your expectations are for spending. And
Well,
you
there's so
and
many
I,
ways to break it.
so many ways to break it. But going into a marriage and being super straightforward and saying, I like designer things. So don't be upset if I come home with a shopping bag.
Right?
Oh, yeah. Fish in a barrel.
I agree.
And
I
so
think
the
that
question is, though, like for you, my question is, can you stick to a budget, or do you often overspend?
okay, well, I've been very blessed that I make my own budgets most of the time. But I do think my husband thinks that I'm crazy because
Well, that's a broader
because
topic.
I spend like instead of designer bags, I start businesses, right?
Right?
Yeah.
Yes, you do.
And I spend a lot of money on that.
However, I think starting businesses is because you're making an investment in something that
I always
could
feel
help
like I'm
your
taking
family.
my money and turning it into more money.
Exactly, which is
Yeah.
what you do.
Yeah.
I don't think that that's overspending.
Yeah, but it does drive him crazy.
I think overspending is like shiny object things that you can't resist. So I just stay away from them all completely. I have so
But
much
sometimes
stuff,
there's
and it's hard.
something. Okay, so me, I'm not like a big designer person. I am to some degree. I like some designers. Like I always say, I love like Chanel from the whole Karl Lagerfeld era,
Well, I mean, I would consider that designer, Gemma.
right? And Claudia Schiffer when she was like a model for Chanel. I got into Chanel. Yeah, like a model. It's like a model, you guys.
But don't you think
Yeah.
that they need to know that on the outset? A little bit. It's your money. So is there like a pool
So that's
that gets
another
to
thing,
be
that's the problem.
Gemma's fun money that you make?
And that's also a problem. Like first marriages, it's like, you know, you guys each have your own and everything you make is yours. By the time you get to your second marriage, I don't know if it's definitely the same way. If it's like yours is mine and mine is yours. Or if you're both working and making money, like where do you draw the line with who? Because if somebody's always going to make more than the other one, right? So it becomes like a whole, like, oh my
She said
God,
right and like in the same
It-
sentence.
help
This is
me.
a genius
Help
idea.
me, Jesus.
Back to religion.
Jesus, take the wheel. I don't-
Jesus, take Gemma's chips. Well, so expectations of what that budget looks like, and are you going to say, like, this is your funny money? Gemma's new
Right.
company that you want to start,
Like every month you get to spend so much on whatever you want.
your funny money
Right.
and their funny money. For instance, some hobbies that men have and women have are
Mhm.
very expensive. Like our friend Rocket
Right.
Girl, mountaineering is her everything. It's a
Or
very
skiing,
expensive hobby.
golf.
I love to ski. Golf's expensive.
Mhm.
So I think also knowing what the expectations are and what you can each spend on your hobby or any items that might seem ridiculous to a partner. When I first got married, John had never been around, my husband had never been around someone who does Botox and, hair and all these expenses, and nails, and
All
he
the
was
things.
shocked. He's like, I don't know anything about this
Just
stuff.
your
This is
maintenance
crazy.
is $3,000 a month. So that's another thing about age. Also, younger, like the majority of people in the world, when you're 18, you guys are both working to maybe afford a 1-bedroom apartment or rent a room in somebody's house as a couple or something because you're both
Correct.
struggling. So when you're younger and you're both struggling coming up the line, I don't think you think about those questions because you're just trying to make the bills every month, right? Together.
It's a date. Right. Now you got me saying right. This is going to have to end. We're just going to have to get the shock collars. I feel like the money's
Oh my
not going to
gosh,
cut it.
I'm scared that you're going to.
I know. But don't you think, like, for my friend who's now in this love lust phase, to say, let's talk about a budget. That's a buzzkill. Budget is a
Yeah.
buzzkill word.
Well,
And
because it's a make or break word. It really is.
It's
Like,
a make or break.
It is. And the thing is, if you know that you're not ready to leave that person, you end up you don't ask the question because you don't really want an answer. You have to be ready to walk out when the person has the wrong answer.
So you avoid all the questions that we know are going to come up later.
Yeah, and sometimes you know the answers already.
And then I've had friends who act as though they're blindsided when you go to get a mortgage and you realize that the person you're already married to has credit issues. Another question, which was a surprise to one of my friends, is have you ever been arrested or had any legal problems? That's a hard question.
Okay, and then what's the degree of that? Like that also there's different degrees. Like if you grew up in a very super conservative family and you were going out with a guy who had like an unpaid speeding ticket, like my first husband.
I'm
That
pretty
should,
sure.
that was the first red flag.
An unpaid speeding
It
ticket.
was his unpaid. It was unpaid to the point where he had a warrant and like he actually got picked up and had to get bailed out.
Wow.
And I remember thinking, do I want to keep dating this guy?
But you did.
Why? Did you have an unpaid speeding ticket? It's so simple.
You ran right past that
So if
red
you can't
flag.
take care of something super simple, that's a pretty big, warning to the way that you live your whole life.
But convicted of a felony,
But then a felony, yeah.
if you're marrying someone and you're not sure if they've been convicted of a felony, that's a pretty
That's a really big deal.
shock when you go to get a loan
Right.
and then they have to check the yes box. Actually, if you are applying for a job at Bravo for
Right.
Housewives, I think because I had to fill out that job application when I
Right.
was going to work for them, you have that check that box
they
that
have to do
says,
it.
have you ever been convicted of a felony? And of course, my answer would be no. However, now I think maybe it's a positive because there have been
Oh
a
yeah,
few,
no, they want you to check the box.
Bravo people that have gone to prison and came right back out, went right back on the show. So I say maybe it's a good thing in reality TV.
Absolutely.
But for every other job in loan applications, it probably is going to be a problem.
Yeah.
Also,
I agree.
Even when you move into a gated neighborhood, the homeowners association does a background check on you, and
That's
all of a
true.
sudden it's like, surprise, I had a felony. You're like, wait,
Well,
what?
That's an interesting concept because you would think that was like not PC or whatnot because you could look at somebody's application and it used to actually be that way where you could look and be like, oh, you're Mexican or oh, you're whatever, and then they wouldn't like rent to you based on your
Well, that's horrible.
race. No, that's like a real thing just 50 years ago, right? So, and then they got around the laws because
Right.
by making associations, and then you only have to abide by the association rules, but they can background check you at any facility if you're going to lease a house, apartment, condo. It's a big deal in New York.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And also it makes sense because if there is someone unrelated to a marriage that's been convicted of a serious felony and there's children in the neighborhood, it's important for them to know,
Absolutely.
especially if someone needs to be reported.
Yeah,
or
what kind of felony? I mean, there's so many.
I know.
I mean, there's so many like, okay, felonies that are, I don't know if this is like a real thing or what. And then there's legitimate, really bad situations. Like you don't want those people living next door to you if they're having like a serious issue, like a child molester or something like that when you have your children there.
Right. And I'm assuming that my friend is not marrying anyone in any of these categories.
I know,
but,
right? But you never
but
know.
just small.
Did you just background check him online? They have all these websites now where you can just go and all you need to know is somebody's like name and age and city or something.
Okay, but is that wrong? If you're in love with someone, to go background check them feels super sneaky unless maybe you say, okay, let's both pull up a background check on each other and make it like a
thing
couple
together.
a couple
You're like,
thing.
babe, tonight
want
I'm
you to
gonna
know
make
everything
some
about
filet
me,
and
right?
we're gonna pull out the laptop and research.
Google each other.
Yeah.
People do
Like-
that anyway. Everybody Googles
I
each
mean,
other.
they're doing it. They're just not telling the other person or something.
But it's not a deep dive into whether
Yeah,
your
like-
legal matters and felonies.
No,
and-
you can pay like $19.95 and get the deep dive.
Great. Can we get them as a sponsor?
I'm pretty sure.
For
I think we should.
$19.95, you can go to gemmasbackgroundcheck.com,
$24.99.
which will be the next business you start to make your fun money.
I do not want to know anything about anybody.
Neither do
Because
I.
ignorance is bliss. Again, that's why we don't ask the questions,
Also, I want to get to know someone for who they are
right?
and love them or hate them for whichever it is. Because I feel like
Yeah.
just sneaking around and trying to find out things about people feels super sketchy.
It's the truth. That's why it's the naked truth.
It's the naked truth.
That is it. You just got to tell the truth. And I think that we totally agree on that when we've talked about it before, is that it does not matter how bad the situation is. Just tell me the truth.
the truth.
Because then I can
Absolutely.
literally deal with it.
we have had this conversation in business so much also.
Right.
People we've been doing business with that tell us one thing and it ends up being another. And it's just, I'm making a ton of money over here, people. You have no idea. My chips are filling up. But no, we don't want to be blindsided. And I think
It's the blind
marriage,
side.
now you're living with someone, there may be children involved, and you're finding out things about them because you rushed into marriage without asking all these questions.
And there's all these things though, even if you do ask the questions that come up like when you're when you're with somebody, as you've seen how they act in different situations, right? Jesus. So it really makes you realize how bad it is. But my ex, he had a son and they were always in court over his son. And they had a lot of situations like with him and his ex-wife and all these different things. And I just remember being like, this is so horrific experience to have to deal with this all the time if you get divorced and you have children and what it does to your kids. And I was watching what it was doing to what would have been if we got married, like my stepson, right? So I took my relationship with him seriously, and it was affecting him to have his mom on the downside of something and then his dad and then back and forth, and they're arguing back and forth, and he's kind of a tool. And the whole thing is, it's like you don't know, you can't answer that question until you're in the thick of it. Like you don't even know who you are. Like I know that him, my ex, he thought he was always doing the right thing, but he was being actually more destructive to his son, right? In the way he was acting.
Absolutely. And that goes back to that question we were asking, like, I said, like,
And
how
I
do you
did say
feel
right
about
one thing.
how do you feel about divorce and how would you handle it? I don't think anyone knows until they're in it.
Yeah, it's so hard to know. You know who you think you would be. But when your
Absolutely.
life, when you have kids and somebody's fighting you for your kid, you're gonna go to the mat like a crazy person.
Kids and money.
Yeah, you mean
You're definitely going
you're
to the
like,
mat.
you trying to kill me, man? I am going to take you down.
And
That's what
you're
is
trying to take my
happening,
child away from me
right?
and not give me money and not,
Yeah.
not
It's,
share. And
you don't know who you are
also
until you get there.
the whole thing about tearing these children through all of this, because I went through the same thing with my ex that had two children from two different ladies, and they were constantly in court. And I just thought, how is this helping the children?
It's so horrible to
And
live like
all
that.
the negative speak about the other partner is telling these children one of your parents is a bad person.
And the parents are mad because now they're in a court battle and they're probably working regular jobs. They have to take time off work. It's a whole fiasco. It's affecting both of their lives. They're both losing money. They're both trying to pay the bills because now they're divorced and trying to live separately. And then there's literally no way, unless you are some kind of monk meditating, amazing, at one with your soul and the earth, are you going to not be angry and and be totally mentally disturbed and distraught until that is settled?
And to go back to that question we were talking about earlier is, how do you feel about divorce?
Yeah.
Well, I don't know how I feel, because are you divorcing me? Because
Right.
then I'm going to be upset and pissed. And if I'm
Right.
divorcing you, maybe it's because I want to get away from you. So I'm going to feel completely different, whichever way it turns out.
Exactly. Like who's wanting the divorce?
So if we're the ones getting left behind, then we're definitely going to be pissed. And
Yeah, you're not going to want it. It's,
so I don't think that a couple going into marriage can say how they're going to react in
I
a
mean, you can
divorce.
say it, but the truth is you don't know until
You
you
don't
get
know.
there.
That's the
And then
naked
you'll be
truth
like,
of it
you know
all.
what you told me? You told me you would never do this. You told me you would love me forever. Right? Oh my God.
my-
That was my chin. It was worth it that time.
It was definitely worth it at that time. That's hysterical. It's true.
Yeah.
I don't think anyone would know how their partner is going to react in divorce.
Mm-mm.
I've known the sweetest people that I thought we'd be married forever, and when their marriage blows up, it's 5 years in court, mud slinging, painful.
So much money too. Like so much money's wasted just because you're arguing. You know, there's always a point, I think, for every couple that's spending $100,000 and plus, sometimes millions on a divorce, is like, I don't know why we even did this. Like we could have just decided to leave amicably and like, I mean,
100%.
it's like, unless you have a lot of money is not worth the headache.
The headache too, the money is one thing, what you put your kids through is another.
Yeah.
And then the stress. You and I both
Aging you.
have anxiety issues from what we've been through in our
Yes.
past, and the amount of anxiety that you're going through.
It's just always like here every
it's
day.
too much in your
Mhm.
chest or your throat. And just walking around with this ball in your stomach thinking, are we ever going to resolve this? And why is it that the person I loved enough to marry them and have children with them is my arch rival at this point?
Oh my gosh, right?
And I
Exactly.
don't
Yeah,
want my
like you
girlfriend to
actually
go through
loved each
that.
other enough to like make babies, raise people, and now you're just ripping each other apart like just no respect left is what happens.
So when we get
It's
back, I
sad.
want to ask you, how am I going to talk to my girlfriend about this without me sounding preachy and lectury?
There's no way.
Okay, well, we're going to try. We got to come up with something. It's TNT. We're going to be right back. Okay, we're back. Gemma, here is the question.
Okay.
Um, we talk about the truth all the time and asking the difficult questions before you get married, especially around finances. I know you and I have lived it, so we know you need to ask, but when you're in love and lust and kisses and roses are flying, and then you have to say, we have to have a serious conversation about our finances.
I know. You really do
It's,
have to say it.
you do.
But I just don't think it's going to happen. I mean, for a lot of people, I just don't think it's going to happen.
I feel like because this is one of my closest friends, I need to broach this subject with her. I'm worried for
If
her.
you're a good friend, you will.
I will,
I
but
think good
then
friends do
I'm
call
going to
you
say,
out.
oh, by the way, have you asked him if he's a felon? And does he have a lot of debt? And are you going to share bank accounts?
And then
And
you're like such an asshole. I'm sorry. If
I
you say that,
know,
could
I
you imagine
know.
you're at lunch? mean, I just pictured myself like as your friend.
I'm just at the deck.
And you like, we go to lunch together and you're just straight up ask me all of those things. I'd be like, what is wrong with you? You're so jaded.
And you're not living in my
Right.
joy and
Yeah.
bliss of
I'm not
right
jaded.
now.
I'm realistic, which is
I'm
completely
realistic
different.
because I'm worried about you.
Yeah.
I've seen so many failures in this particular department of not understanding your financial expectations and
Right.
getting married and then being blindsided with expenses of kids and do you want a house? Do you want to live in an apartment? What kind of car can I drive? What are your budgetary expectations or needs? And
Right.
if you don't talk about it ahead of time, or maybe the other person, instead of being like, I'm offended, thinks, wow, you're really practical and you're looking out for our future. But I feel like this could go one way or the other in a very severe direction.
It's all about his personality.
Oh,
So
you don't think it's about the woman?
no, I feel like it's if he responds to her from a place of love and understanding her need for security, then I think it's a real conversation. And I think that, just like men and women, like as much as we can do things, there are some things we cannot do. You know what I mean? And we cannot fulfill certain parts of each other's lives. Men and women are men and women for a reason. And I feel like you have to, if a woman in general is going to want to know, especially if she's in a place where she's dependent on him for food, shelter, and survival, that's a fair question. And I think that if he understands that, where she's coming from, I think any kind of man that has integrity will understand the question and understand that whether it's rational or not, or whether it's offensive or not, or any of those things, is that she just needs to feel safe and secure in the relationship.
That is always my word, is security,
Yeah.
especially because you and I, having gone through really horrible experiences with each of our former spouses dying, I was left
Absolutely.
holding a bag of, I had no idea. I had no idea about our finances because he wouldn't allow me to know anything. And I had one expectation after he passed of what I was going to uncover with a ton of attorneys.
Right. Oh
And
my
it
gosh.
should all be thought out if you
That
love
whole
one
I
another.
can't even imagine living through that whole situation the way that you did, because there's so many moving parts. And when people are always like, I'm so sorry for your loss, it's like, okay, well, that wasn't even the hard part.
Right. You're
I
in
know that
shock
sounds
enough.
horrendous, but I mean, it is, but it's like you're so in the moment trying to deal with your life every day. It's not like you're at home grieving on the couch. You're literally like, what the hell am I going to do?
You're trying to figure out how I'm going to keep my daughter in private school
Right.
and where the
Not
car
disturb her
payments
life.
need to go. And
What's happening? Who pays the mortgage? Somebody dies on the 28th. You got 4 days to figure out what's going on.
that was, in addition to being in shock, I felt as though I was just staring at a wall thinking, I am having to start my life over. And I
Right.
don't even know where my life came from because I never
Right.
asked these questions.
And the truth is, if your husband is looking out for you, it's his job, especially if he's the primary breadwinner. And if there's a woman, it's her job as a primary breadwinner. If you're ruling your household and you have people dependent on you for their livelihood, it's your job to make sure that you put those things in order. It doesn't cost that much. You can get a planning attorney, like $2,500, save up for it if you don't have the money. If you have any kind of property, if you have anything that needs to be divided, and make that plan. And even if you don't have something financially, I think that if you just have basic things like passwords to your computer and bank account,
100%.
how do you get into, anything like what is happening? Am I listed on your credit card company to make it easier? Am I like all these things should be laid out? Like no matter what age you are, if you're thinking about getting married or you're starting a life, they call it starting a life for a reason. It's not just like you go down to the thing and you get a paper and now, woohoo, we're married. No, we're agreeing to build a life together. We're agreeing to acquire assets together and to make a better life for our children that we might have or have. And it's about that longevity. You need to be planning for longevity. I think anything outside of being able to have that conversation where both people are understanding is not a real relationship. It's a good time.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
that's why I'm concerned for my friend because she's rushing so quickly and I'm excited
Yeah.
for her and I want to be
She's on
there
a
and
dopamine
celebrate.
high.
Exactly. She is living on the dopamine right now.
Yeah.
And he seems like a great guy and everything, but it's all good until it falls apart.
Right. And
But
he might be a great guy, but we don't know. Right.
and at the same time, something that you mentioned, I have a couple of different friends that are couples that have children and they only fly separately
Right.
because they are worried that if something happened to both of them, that
You
where
don't
would
want
that
your whole
leave their
family.
children? Because the child doesn't have any idea where the assets are. And having those tough conversations saying we need to make sure, as you said, bank accounts, we know how to get into everything for each other, not in a I'm going to try to hurt you way, but in
Right.
a if something happens to you tomorrow, I need to know back to the right jar. I need to know how to fix things and how to shut things down. And if I don't have that kind of access, which now with security issues probably feels scary, but leaving somebody just wondering what do I do next isn't love.
But isn't that what trust is too? When you can have that conversation and you trust that person with the answer, when you have to have those hard conversations, just even being able to feeling comfortable enough in a relationship to actually express your concern, where a lot of people feel like if I asked my boyfriend or whoever or a question like this, he might leave me. Like if you're feeling that insecure in that relationship and you already know it's the wrong relationship, it's you have to somehow find the strength to leave it because you have to be able to have these
Oh, that's so
conversations early
hard.
on, right?
But
I do think that it's that
right.
if we can't if I mean I've been that person I was in a relationship for years where I was just like scared to even say anything that I needed because I thought, oh, he'll just be done with me. And then that's
Correct.
really an interesting thing because it's like that whole thing you don't want to love somebody more than they love you. Unfortunately, I think that's true. A relationship is always better for you if somebody loves you more. But I do believe that there's relationships like my friends, Tony and Tanya. I always use them as an example for everything. But they communicate so well that they both love each other equally. And then they're able to like it's like, yeah, they have hard times or whatever, disagreements, but they're nothing outrageous. And they talk through everything. And I'm always like, God, if everybody could have a relationship like that. Because most people are meant for each other. I think that when things are falling apart, it's because the communication sucks, or you're somebody's scared to say the truth, and somebody's getting offended instead of being open minded to it.
So asking these questions, it doesn't even have to be questions. I don't want it to
Yeah.
seem like for her, like it's an
Interview.
interrogation. It's just, so how would you feel about $100,000 car? Like
Right.
what do you think about that? Just maybe in casual conversation. So it's not, well, Taylor made me a list
Do
of
you
questions I
think
need to go down with you before we get married.
right. Right.
Make me the asshole. Go ahead. It's okay.
Do you think that she is unaware that she's being impulsive, or do you think she's 100% aware of that she's being impulsive?
I think she's in love fog right now. And
So she's not aware that she's being impulsive.
I don't think
That's a hard one.
it's an exciting, impulsive feeling for
Right.
her right now. And I don't want to be
Reality
yeah,
coach
I
right
don't,
there.
I don't want to be her
The reality
reality
police.
coach, but then I
Yeah.
also don't want her to come to me in a year and go, why didn't you fucking tell me I should have asked these questions? You've been married forever.
Oh my
Like,
gosh, I don't even know this person.
exactly.
Yeah.
And he's completely shocked me. We're getting a divorce and he's apparently a convicted felon and he hates my kids. And I fear for all the
Oh my
situations
gosh.
I've seen as a woman who's watched so many friends go through divorces and things that I've experienced and you've experienced. I don't want her to end up like that. So this is all out of love,
Well,
not
I agree. If she
interrogation.
thinks she's getting married to be married forever, or does she think she's getting married to have a good time and see where it goes? See, I think like if you're just getting married because this is freaking fun and you don't have kids and or your kids are already grown up and you're like, we're getting married and like whatever happens, happens, fine. But if you're like your first marriage, you don't have kids, you plan on having kids, you're trying to build a life with somebody, then you need to think it through, you know?
Absolutely. And I just don't want, because both you and I felt so blindsided when we were left behind with so many problems, is knowing what you're getting into and knowing that this person's going to be completely forthright with you. You
Mhm.
can work through any of it. If the
Although
person says, I have
also,
bad credit, it's like, okay, then let's work together and fix it. It's not a
right.
deal breaker. It's just tell me on the front end before we try to get a mortgage or something else happens. And then you tell me that we're incapable
Well, I
of
think
getting
there's
one.
probably a high percentage of people that if they've already like started to, put the deposit on the venue, um, that they're probably going to go through with it no matter what the answers are. So it's probably good to just get it out there. I don't think there's a small percentage of people that are probably like, this is a deal breaker. I'm out. I mean, kids is for sure that, but I don't know, all the other things could pretty much be worked through. And if you can't work through those things early, you're probably not going to work through all the things you don't think about.
Especially when in like the huge like love lusty phase. If
Yeah.
you
Don't get married in the lust phase.
I know, but
You can't.
how long should we be together before the
I
lust
did.
fades?
I did. I mean, my children's father definitely got married. It was like 3 months in. He was like, "When are we having a baby? When are we getting married?" And I was like, "We can't get married. Everybody will think we're crazy." He was like,
I
"Why
did the same
not?
thing.
Why not?" I mean, it was like 1 year. We bought a house, had a baby, got married. I met him. Like it was like crazy. And then it was like, "Oh yeah, I was married briefly before this. Oh yeah, I did go to jail for abuse once, but it wasn't me. She was crazy." And
Same.
and
I
I
heard the
was
same
like,
thing.
come to find out, I like literally met him like 3 weeks out of jail before, but it was like, no, he didn't do anything. Well, mind you, I loved him, right? Like I totally loved him. But just like all of us, we all have things we're not great at. We all have, sometimes I'm crying in the closet, with full blown anxiety. Like it, we all have bad points. His good points outweighed his bad points. I just wish I wasn't like the target of some bad points, but I feel like you really like had I known a lot of things, like if I had listened to that speeding ticket that was
Absolutely.
unpaid, when everything else was indicative of that one thing, if I would have just gone with my gut on that one thing, my whole life would be different.
I feel so similar in that the gut is always telling us one thing, but when the lust and the love
Oh
and the
yeah.
heart gets in the
Oh no, he was
way,
so hot. It was like time stood still.
it was so hot. Well, that changes everything,
Yeah.
right? I mean, do not ask George Clooney any of these hard questions.
Yeah.
Just run right to the altar because
Yeah.
he's just so hot.
Okay, George Clooney has nothing on my first husband.
Oh,
No,
well,
no, he was
okay.
hot.
You were going to have to show me some
Yeah, I
pictures
will
of
have
that
to. I
later.
mean, I just maybe it was me.
I feel like it's challenging for a lot of women to have these conversations with people also because we want to be seen as strong, independent women.
Right?
And yet, if I have to talk to you about finances, does that diminish that feeling for me? And then also, do men see it as she's a gold digger? Because that's such a hot topic too.
Oh
So,
my gosh.
gently having these financial conversations before
We have to do a
marriage,
whole show on gold digging.
we really do.
Yeah, because that
I
is
know
a
some
real thing.
experts.
I bet you do. I
I mean,
do.
I'm not proud, but I'm kind of impressed
I
actually.
mean, I
I'm
probably
like,
know some,
wow,
they just don't tell me about it.
right?
Yeah,
I think it's a job in and of itself. They say when you marry for money, you earn every penny.
absolutely. I do agree with that.
Yeah. So you
Mhm.
better have these difficult conversations
Yeah.
and before you get married, not
Yeah.
once you're knee deep into it and then things are falling apart and you're like, wait, there were really no wheels on this bus. I had
Yeah.
no idea.
I had no idea. What kind of craft are we in?
What kind of craft are we in? Okay, well, I'm going to try to talk to her about it, and
I
maybe I'll
think
just leak it out
as a
slowly.
good friend, I feel like you have to kind of be like, hey, so I
I know
mean,
you love him, but
yeah.
like
So have you like talked about anything real?
anything real,
Yeah.
right? Or maybe not. They're just huffing and puffing and like
Yes.
right now.
Ooh, yeah,
Yeah.
something like that.
All that. And
Yeah.
they're going on trips and having all this fun. And then when the dust settles and you're sitting at home, it's like, oh shit, we forgot to talk about that one thing, our money.
Yeah. Oh, that. Oh, we need that.
Oh yeah, that
Yeah.
whole thing. And retirement
And
and
it's
everything
becoming
else.
more important of an issue, I believe.
Absolutely
Yeah.
it is. So, okay, well, we have so much more to talk about, but we're out of time for today.
Aw.
So, we'll definitely pick up where we left off. But this is TNT. I'm Taylor, and this is Gemma, and we'll see you soon. Thanks, Firecrackers.